So obviously I haven't posted in absolutely forever, but this video is going to be a little bit different. Don't really have any writing stuff. I do have some builds, well, a build, ATV wise, but that's for a later date because I got a long way to go on it, and I got some cool stuff related to a truck. But anyway, anybody who's had a 261 Stihl knows that it's quite impressive saw for what it is and how fast it can cut. However, when you run a 20-inch bar, which is what quite a few of them, at least in my area, come with, this one came with it and my uncle's did as well, you'll notice that it doesn't quite oil the bar enough whenever you're in a really dry wood like ash, which is what we have a whole lot of in southern Illinois, even though it's pretty much all dead. So anyway, especially if the saw's been modified and it uses more gas than oil, which this one has. I've done the light porting and advanced the timing, muffler mod, and I got some other stuff done to it and in the works too, but I don't really have any results yet, so we're just not going to mention that. Anyway though, the difference of what we're going to be doing here is we have a oiler bolt from I believe it's an MS 460, or it may even be an Australian version. I'll put the link or the part number in the description. But pretty much, I did my uncle's 261. This is the oiler bolt, the adjuster for the original. And you can see the 261, which is on the left, the different profile of the bolt. So you could modify the original one, but there's a good chance that you're going to be limited by this little nub that sticks out. And yes, you could modify that too, but I bought two of these for about $14 a piece, and if you're that cheap and you have a saw this expensive, you really got other problems. Then again, there's also going to be those people that say you don't need to increase the oiler on one of these saws to begin with. But anyway, roughly it increases the output by at least 14%. I did some rough measurements and other stuff, and it's at least 14%. I'm not quite sure how much. But anyway, we're going to skip a couple steps. The most noteworthy thing is if you haven't ever took a steel clutch off of a newer Stihl chainsaw, the clutch is reverse threaded, and it's a 19 millimeter or 3/4. Use a 6-point socket and an impact. Works so much better than rope or whatever other dumb crap we use. So we're going to jump right into the actual modification. And I actually have a gimbal, so I don't have to listen to all these idiots whining about shaking and camera jumping around. So anyway, we get the clutch off, bar, chain, all that junk. You have to take the oiler off. It's not a big deal. You're going to need a T27 Torx. They have them for those little impact drivers. I prefer the hand one. I just went and bought the steel one because my dealer carries it, so that's the part number on it. So you actually you got to take this cover off. I don't think you would absolutely have to, but it would be much better if you did. And you need to clean these saws too. This one I blew off with compressed air already. So once you get this cover off, and this one, you gotta get this one off too. That was on there a little bit. Interesting. Anyway, you got to get these covers off. There's 3 bolts in the plastic piece, 1 in the metal piece. Not a big deal. Simple. Try not to lose the bolts. And if yours is stuck on here like mine is for some unknown reason, you might have to pop it up with a screwdriver. There we go. So anyway, this goes back to needing to clean this thing. And you're just going to see just how nasty this thing is underneath this chain brake. And I don't know why. Well, I know why, but I don't really know how they get so much just junk in them. It's actually pretty impressive. This one's stuck on there pretty good. There we go. The other saw just came off. So you can see there's a big old ball of junk right there. Bunch of junk here. I'm going to blow that off later. So next thing we need to do is take the oiler off. So next thing we're going to do is take the oiler off, which consists of 2 bolts and a little rubber hose. Oops. Little rubber hose right there that you can just push off with a screwdriver, and it's off, I think. Well, it'll come off when the oiler comes off. Anyway, this needs to be kind of clean. You can see this is still dirty, but it's just because it's got so much oil on it. You need to wash it off with some sort of spray, but whatever you do, do not spray it with it still on the chainsaw, because brake cleaner, starting fluid, and all that stuff is hard on the crankshaft seals, and you don't want to replace them because that will take a whole lot more work than what most people are willing to do. In fact, this what I'm doing right here is more than most people are willing to do. See, that oil line pops right off. It may spill a little bit of oil. Keep in mind, this is literally an oil pump, and we'll pick up as soon as I clean this up. Again, clean it up out of the saw, not in it, because you'll ruin that seal. I've seen it twice already from people doing that, cleaning their saws at the end of their season and using parts cleaner. It might not clean it, or it might not ruin it right off the bat, but it will eventually, and also get rid of all the junk that's maybe built up around the seals as well. Mine had a little bit of dirt. Anyway, we'll get right back to that. So now what we're doing, once we have this off and it's cleaned up, really it should be a little cleaner than this, but this pump's pretty darn dirty. It still works fine though, but whatever. Nice tacky oil. So basically what we're doing is we're taking this bolt out right here, and to do that there's a roll pin right there. There you can see the pin right there, and that has to come out. So I'll scrape the dirt away, and I'm not gonna show you how I get it out because it's just kind of a pain. I got too much stuff to hold on to, plus be inside the camera. So what works for me is I have a really small punch that just happens, it's actually too big to go in this roll pin, and the roll pin is right there. It's a little black dot. So after that is knocked out, how I do it is I use a punch that's actually too big, but it's enough to start the roll pin coming out, and then I use a 1.5 millimeter Allen key or Allen wrench to finish tapping it out. You don't have to beat these things out, they just lightly tap out. And after that, I will work this bolt back and forth, and I'll take this little screwdriver, just any screwdriver, stick it in this gap, and just start wiggling on it and prying on it, and eventually it'll come out. It's stuck in there pretty darn good. I even put some wire cutters to use as a pry tool in between here to pop this out, and we'll fast forward to once I get that out. first off, before anything, I'd like to mention that this works for just about any Stihl chainsaw that has an adjustable oiler that is a more modern one. So it might work for as old as an 036 or 026, probably will. Considering this is an 046, 044 part. Many of them saws that have the adjustable oiler, this oiler bolt should work. They're pretty universal. But anyways, even if they don't, I'll show you a different way that you can modify them to get more oil. Because basically all we're doing is we're making it so you can kind of see that pin moving back and forth as I spin it. That's just the pump, just doing what it does, pumping oil. And we're basically increasing the stroke. So we're basically making an oil, a stroker oil pump. Instead of more air and fuel, we just have more oil. Pretty simple. So now that we have the original bolt out, and be careful whenever you pry this thing out of there. You're not trying to break anything, and you also don't want to damage these O-rings. Because most of the time they're still good. I've done this to several saws ranging from, I don't know, this saw is probably close to 10 years old. They're still fine. I did one that was about 20 years old and they were still fine. They weren't hard and crusty. So it just depends how much the saw has been used. But next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pop those O-rings off or just replace them, whichever you prefer, and put them on the new bolt. Oh, that's the stock bolt from my uncle's 261. So again, much it's hard to see. There we go. I did have the right one the first time. Anyway, much smaller pin and outer diameter. You can grind this down, but you're going to run into that nub being too tall. The other thing you can do is, if your saw is not adjustable, the other thing is there's parts of this that are spring loaded and whatnot, and don't lose it. But the actual drive part that is up in here, well, I guess I can't really show it, but it's basically tapered, and you can grind that taper farther back. I believe the whole thing knocks out from, I guess it'd be this side. This looks like a little cap. I haven't ever took one of them out. I usually just modify the bolt, or actually I just replaced the bolt. But if your saw didn't have an adjustable oiler, you could just modify that part, because this whole thing's on a spring and it's just doing this and sucking up oil. In fact, you can even hear it sucking up oil. So place them O-rings and then you'll just slowly slip it back together. Now we just go back together. We've got the O-rings switched. It helps if you lube them up a little bit. Also, make sure there's not any junk in there. This oiler's kind of beat up. I might just end up ordering a new one. In fact, the original control bolt, I highly doubt the camera will focus. See if I can find it. But it's been used enough that this actually has a flat spot beat into it from the, there it is, from the oiler. And you can kind of see, you can see the shiny marks right there. Just won't quite focus on it. There we go. So it's definitely been used quite a bit. So after this is all nice and cleaned up, for some reason my pump's corroded more than anything. Lube up the O-rings, and then you're just going to cram them back in there. You might have to use pliers. I usually do. Pliers, vice grips, whatever. Just don't damage the oiler. I like to put it on this nub right here and just squeeze. It might take 2 or 3 times. It might slip off. Might drop the oil pump on your floor. but eventually it'll go down in there. And don't force it too much. If it's not going, take your screwdriver and twist it back and forth a little bit and push in. That helps. The other thing you gotta do is you gotta be sure that this oiler is in. Otherwise it won't go in. That might have been why it wasn't in. Normally I push it in, I stick my finger in there, and then I'll squeeze it. And it looks like it's trying to go. There it goes. Anyway, and then we'll set this to the absolute max, which in normal circumstances would completely drain the tank well before it would run out of gas. But this saw has been modified so it won't. And now you can go back to the beginning. You can see that this has quite a bit more stroke now. So more stroke, more oil, everything else, yada yada yada. There's an O-ring right there. That was kind of cool. I didn't even make it move. But there's an O-ring right there, and you have to make sure that's there, because otherwise, obviously, it won't seal on this nipple. So you got to put your pump back on, put it back together, slip your hose back on. I usually just use a flat screwdriver. Same flat screwdriver that pulled it off. My camera's about to die, / phone. For whatever reason, using the camera just absolutely kills the battery. So there, the pump's back on. Also, don't forget the roll pin. I've already forgot it. So I gotta do that real quick. I gotta put the roll pin back in. But this is not very difficult. Just takes a little bit of time. Whenever I'm not all flustered from doing a video, trying to speak right, not sound like an inbred hillbilly, this takes me about 35 to 40 minutes. You can maybe do it faster. You can definitely do it a lot slower. And whatever you do, don't forget to put that roll pin back in. Technically, I think it would be like a 2mm punch, but I just use whatever I got, and that's just what I go with. So we fast forward a little bit on the reassembly. It's nothing that is obviously difficult. In fact, none of this is difficult. If you aren't comfortable doing this, I really don't understand how or why, because I'm an idiot and I mess up a lot of stuff just for fun. Not intentionally, usually. Sometimes. But this is probably one of the easier things I've ever done to a saw, besides maybe a muffler mod or advancing the timing. Those take a little less time usually. But anyway, just reassemble everything after you put the pump back on. Make sure your little O-rings on there. Make sure your bolts are on tight. Don't like strip them out. I mean, don't go ham on them. There's just no need. And then put this little plate back on. There we go. I don't know why it was so stuck on there earlier. Put your last little bolt back in. Then make sure the shaft is nice and clean. That's what she said. And I already put a little bit of vegetable oil. You can put grease, whatever, onto your clutch and put it back on. Unfortunately, I have a spur sprocket. I would much rather have a rim, because I would like to try a 25-inch bar and chain setup I have that I believe would actually do quite well, because it's a semi-skip. Shouldn't quite really be stiff like that, but it's not turning the motor over, so that's fine. Not the end of the world. Not the biggest deal in the world, for sure. So next, Some people are going to hate this. I personally don't care because I've never ran a crankshaft. Oh, maybe that's why it's feels a little strange going on. I have the clutch backwards. Yeah, that'll do it. Maybe. Anyway, some people are gonna, yeah, that's much better. Some people are gonna whine, say you shouldn't do this, you should use rope, but I've literally done this for probably 20 different saws now. I've changed clutches on, and I just stick an impact on it and give it a few ugga-duggas because it's going to spin the motor over, so it's not going to go crazy tight. You could strip it out, but it definitely would be difficult to. And that should be plenty. So you're going to put your sprocket back on. Put it back on straight. Make sure that nothing's interfering with it, such as the chain brake, which kind of looks like mine was. There we go. Find your bearing that is somewhere in your kitchen floor. It kind of needs to be replaced, but that's okay because we're going to put a rim sprocket on it shortly. So it's not gonna ruin the crank for just a tiny bit longer. And now I got it all stuck. Anyway, you get the point. Put it back together. That kind of this thing's got kind of a ridge war on the bearing on the outer part of it, so there we go. Has to go on just right. Put your cover or your washer on. Also be sure to put the washer that goes on in the back. You don't want to forget that. And lose your bearing once again whenever you pull that off to show people. There we go. Helps whenever that bearing is already inside the clutch and it just wiggles on, doesn't try to get crooked so bad. Push everything on there nice and snug, and then you can get this snap ring back on there. And if you can't, then you got some dirt somewhere and just needs wiggled around. See there, I got just enough room, maybe. Yeah, I think I got just enough room. And it's pretty snug. I usually use large screwdriver or something. Yeah, there we go. And I'll put my hand on it so it can't go flying. And I'll bump it with my hand and it's on. And put your bar and chain back on. That's pretty self-explanatory. But hope you enjoyed this. Hope it helped you. Certainly helped me. I was definitely not the first one to figure this out. Or the last. I just happened to run across it while reading, and it, like I said, this works for a very large variety of Stihl chainsaws. It might even work for Husqvarna's. It just won't be Stihl part number. It might be a Husqvarna part number for the oiler. Anywho, put all your stuff back on and go cut wood. Not difficult at all. And yes, this is a lightweight 325 pitch bar. The bar that came with this saw was kind of worn funny, such as it had oiling problems, or they were just lazy and didn't sharpen the chain worth a darn. So I went ahead and just replaced it. And this bar was not really worth it, but it was for weight savings. But it was certainly cheaper than Stihl, so I had that going for me. And pretty much it was worth it for at the time. And that's pretty much it. can't forget my chain saver. Those are all Stihl parts. They aren't the stupid aftermarket ones. I don't believe in putting humongous dogs on saws. But anyway, it's all done. Thanks for watching.